And right now, I think it says we are, in fact, live.
Mm-hmm. It's showing them.
Oh, it says, Jared, can you resend me the Hangout link on Twitter? Oh, we can do that. So I'm going to send her the link real quick to invite her to this Hangout. Hold here on a sec. I was hearing a delay in my headphones because it's a slight delay on Facebook or on YouTube. So I'm going to send that link back to her real quick.
Okay.
And then we could probably start with the chat, and she'll probably join right in. And
okay, cool. So how long have you done Flipped Classroom?
Myself, I got started with it, I would say, in 2014 is when I graduated with my master's, and a main focus of that was on flipped learning. But I was dabbling in it for probably 2 years prior to that, maybe 3 years prior to that.
Yeah.
I was still trying to just kind of figure it out, read the books, read up on some blogs. And at that time, there was still a lot of discussion on blog posts as far as
right.
flipped class is not good and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So I was kind of going with what works and what didn't work, but it wasn't until I actually dove deeper into it as a part of my master's work to really understand how it focuses on pedagogy and not just the videos. For me, I thought it was just videos.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of where I am right now, is just getting into it a little bit and getting more knowledgeable about it and getting past the fact that, it is more than just videos. Certainly that's a big part of it, but that's kind of where I am right now, is trying to weed through, what works, what doesn't, what's effective, what's not. So yeah, I would say I'm definitely in the dabbling mode right now, kind of where you were a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and at that point I was still kind of experimenting with what would make a good video or anything along those lines. And so at that moment it was at that time it was like flip teachers dabbling, trying to communicate with each other to come to some kind of commonality set of rules.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of those have been established now, so it really helps any other teachers that are trying to kick in and start their classroom with flipping.
So the teachers that I've heard have the most success with it say that, when they first started, it was really about the videos, but then it became one of those things where when it was working really well, they felt like different groups of kids would be doing different things in class at the same time, depending on their knowledge base, their mastery of the subject. Like for example, if kids didn't watch the video the night before, there would be a group watching the video. If they did watch it but only got a little bit from it, then they would be doing something a little bit more, not basic, but a little bit more on like the basic side of things. And then the kids that had full mastery of it, they would be doing something a little bit more advanced. So it was almost like different groups of kids were doing different things in the classroom at the same time. So you really were facilitating rather than, just having kids watch videos and then having them do assignments in class. And everybody does the same thing, even though they don't have the same understanding. Do I have that about right? Or
yes. I would say my interpretation of the studies through my literature review helped formulate a little bit more in my classroom the idea of students being able to work at varying levels, and me being more of the facilitator. That role change was huge. In fact, as soon as I would say 2013, I totally did away with my teacher desk. I got rid of it out of my classroom, and then because really I looked at my desk and I thought, this is what's really anchoring me for whatever reason.
Yeah.
When really it should be about the students. So getting rid of the other reason I did that was because that particular 8th grade that year had a higher amount of students with IEPs. And so I thought, I'm going to have to be working one-on-one with them individually around the room more frequently. So I really have no purpose for a desk. So essentially what I did is I just kind of took the things out of my desk and I got this just really basic 3-tier bookshelf. And that was just kind of like my vertical desk.
Okay.
And so at that point, it was then more mobility with the desks. They were, with groups and shifting. I mean, my room never looked the same any 2 days. So
Right.
It really was me moving around a lot. And I guess that's one, misconception that some teacher that I hear in some of those blog posts is flip class is an excuse for teacher to push out that stuff and then sit back and do nothing. And I never experienced that. So I don't know where that misconception came from, but that was, and what I would probably say is that leads to the number one biggest mistake with flipped classroom. And the biggest misconception is I am pushing out the lower levels of learning in order to make room for more lower levels.
Yeah.
You are totally setting yourself up for a failure at that point.
Right.
And so like, there were some teachers that I heard, I went to a couple of conferences because once I started getting flipped learning, I thought, okay, I'm getting this down fairly well, but I want to take it to another level with flip mastery. And, I know that she's going to be popping back in here pretty soon, hopefully. And I know that she's reached a classroom where she was able to do that. But at least the teachers that I heard from, I didn't get into it that much. But what they were telling me is I was able to push out lower levels in order for students to tackle those online lower levels within my classroom and then take the assessments that may have gotten me into mid levels and maybe some upper levels in order to reach mastery.
Sure.
But what really helped me understand how to teach pedagogically was I want to push out lower levels so that way inside my classroom, I make the best effort that everything we're doing in that room is absolutely upper level thinking.
Right. Yeah.
And not only that, I wanted my summative assessments to be only completed with upper level thinking, because then that completely takes away the idea of cheating.
Right.
It can't happen. You can't do it when I ask you to write an essay or to create anything that tells me you understand this information. It takes away the idea of cheating. And that was what was really powerful for me.
Right. Okay. So if you don't mind me asking, what at that point when you started, what were you teaching then and what are you teaching now?
Yeah, so back then I was teaching middle school and high school English,
Okay.
which thankfully enough, English teachers have been flipping the classroom for hundreds of years, as Aaron Sands and John Bergman have said in their book. Mm-hmm. We require lower level thinking, go read, come back, and be prepared to do upper level thinking. So doing some more with that idea of not just going off and reading and then coming back to my classroom and doing more lower level thinking, I was able to expand on that a little bit. But what was really helping me further was I was starting to dabble with like project-based learning. So right now I am in a role, this is starting my third year actually, of being a technology integration specialist consultant at an area education agency here in Iowa. What state are you in right now?
Missouri.
Missouri. So do you guys have like area education agencies or agencies that basically support teachers in school districts?
Yeah, so I live in St. Louis, but I work a little bit south of St. Louis. So the region, the district that kind of supports us is called like the St. Louis RPDC, the Regional Professional Development Center. So, and I'm actually starting a conference, the year-long conference there in a couple of weeks. They do a teachers academy. So it's 1 or 2 days a month one or 2 days a month for the year. And they do a great job. They do a lot of hands-on coordination, very good with giving out resources and assistance. So we're very familiar with their work and what they do for our school, but they're great.
Awesome. Yeah, so we're kind of like, we're state funded. So there are, I forget how many AEAs is what we're called around the state, but we're state funded to basically help teachers in every capacity. Like our AEA covers 8 different counties. So we have many, many consultants, special ed consultants, math consultants, science consultants, and all that stuff. Cool. But a lot of what I do is I kind of help teachers. Being a technology integration specialist, the ideas of flipped learning have allowed me to utilize technology more effectively, along with project-based learning and blended learning and stuff like that. So ultimately, what I felt was the most effective for my classroom was I used flipped learning strategies to push out the lower levels, and then I used project-based learning strategies in order to build and beef up my in-class instruction.
Right.
So the combining the two really is what helped. And so when I hear someone say PBL is the only way to go or flipped learning is the only way to go, they're both learning. Right. They're both ways to get students to get back into the upper levels of thinking more frequently and over the longer course of duration of time.
Right. And that's good. I think the best learning happens when, you take multiple methods and you just do whatever works best for you, because, we're all different teachers and we all have different personalities. And, I think, that one size fits all. I'm not a big fan of when teachers say, oh, it has to be this way or it has to be that way. I think everything works best when you take the best of both or 3 or 4 different worlds and combine it together. So that's good that you said that, because I think when I've seen flipped learning, it's only been that, and it hasn't been PBL with it or anything else with it. So that helps. That's something that I will look at.
So what, if you don't mind me asking, what like grade level and content area and all that stuff are you teaching?
I teach, I've taught American government, which is a sophomore for our district. We teach sophomores. So I've taught that this will be my 8th year. And that's as long as I've been at my school that I'm at right now. So I've been there my whole career.
Cool.
Yeah. And I've taught all levels. I'm teaching honors and regular this year, and I've done that for the last 4 or 5 years. So I know this year I'm trying to bring in, with it obviously being an election year, I'm trying to, flip as much as possible, because there's just so many things that I want my kids to do. There's so many activities and so many projects and so many hands-on application style activities that I want my kids to do in class, that I want to try to minimize as much as possible the amount of time I'm lecturing and, just presenting content. So that's really the big reason why I'm so kind of curious about this now, because, every 4 years we have to kind of change what we do with the election. It's almost like a different curriculum in a sense, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's a great challenge. I love teaching during election years. It's awesome, but it definitely, that's kind of been the catalyst that's made me push to want to try something new this year.
Cool. So the cool thing that I felt, and you're kind of alluding to it, is when I began flipping my classroom, when I was pushing out lower levels, my new goal for inside my class was, obviously upper level thinking. But I found that through that upper level thinking, I was able to get students to make connections to today's context more easily, or I had more time to do that.
Right. Yeah.
Which, when you look at Common Core and in the state of Iowa, we have kind of adopted variations of that and called it the Iowa Core, especially within the English area, but you also see it in social studies too, as far as making connections and all of that stuff. For example, just a quick example, like reading the Odyssey, a 3,000-year-old text. Mm-hmm. You get these kids looking at the book like, dude, why are we even reading this? And I'd say probably the first year or two, when I wasn't flipping my classroom, it was difficult to get them to see some of those connecting ideas. But once I began to flip my classroom, I was able to do certain activities where they could connect. Like I had one student bring in this song that connected, they felt, with this character, and this song that is today connects with this character's storyline.
Right.
And I'm like, that's awesome,
that's great.
And
that's cool.
So they're seeing those kind of things, and we're able to do those kind of activities. And like and then in that moment, I'm like, that's fantastic. You need to share that with the class. Can we share that? I would not have had the time to do that if I'm like, sorry, we don't have time. We got to get through this lower level material today, you know, and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm able to stop and let the learning happen.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. I know, you know, I try as much as I can to make as many real world connections as possible with my content. And I feel like I did a better job of it last year than any other year, but still, you know, I teach a state tested class too. Our class has what's called the end of course exam, and it's the only social studies class that's state tested. So it's just, you have to hit certain material. And so that definitely, if you don't flip, or you don't, you know, do some semblance of flipping, that there's a lot of things that I've had to push out the last couple of years that I would love for my kids to do that are project based and really cool. And that's a bummer, you know, when you have to phase out, you know, things that, you know, will really stick with kids and really resonate with them, to hit vocab, essentially. Not that vocab's not important, but I'd like to, you know, spend more time on the application of the material and not just the material, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. Like vocabulary was the one area that I started to kind of change a little bit, as well as grammar mechanics. As an English teacher, I found myself, what are the things that I'm constantly having to repeat just in papers or whatever it is? And of course, it was those mechanical and grammatical things that we cover in the classroom. And so I would say, you know, I would just be at that point, I would just be circling things. And then I would say, might want to check out the comma splice video. So it reduced my, you know, you want to give good critical feedback, and I would, but even on the things where you kind of saw those errors, I was still able to reference students back to a resource that we've had before.
Right.
We actually got someone on the YouTube channel here that posted a question talking about the combination of PBL and flipped simultaneously. And I hope that I didn't confuse you, Jordan, or anyone else, but I'm a firm believer in combining any methodologies that allow students to reach the upper levels more frequently. Mm-hmm. You know, like I mentioned before, flipping strategies, like how to take these lower levels and push them outside the classroom. And when I say lower levels, I don't say videos. I always say lower levels, because that conveys to teachers, look, it could be a video, it could be a reading assignment, it could be even like just participating in a little discussion forum.
Yeah.
It literally could be anything that falls into the lower half of Bloom's taxonomy. And then by doing that, now I actually do, where I felt the most value in my classroom was added, was when I started to bring in those project-based learning methods inside my classroom, in order to allow students to collaboratively work and all that other stuff. And then to address one, that brings me back to something you said at the very beginning, Jordan, that was, a teacher always starts off with, well, how do I get all the students to watch the videos, and how do I hold them accountable and everything? Right. And I would kind of say that that idea of accountability for me, just, I didn't push it away right away, but it kind of melted away slowly, because I finally said, it's on the students to do the lower level work. And for me, it helped when students saw that we were doing upper level thinking inside the classroom. And I said, look, to do this activity, you really have to have this lower level understanding. I would see over time that more and more students were starting to watch the videos more frequently, because number one, even if I attached some little formative 5-question check your understanding quiz with it, I would never put those in the grade book. So they were there for the students' understanding. So I took off the extrinsic motivation factor, mm-hmm. and then they started to build in the intrinsic motivation to do it. And then by doing that, I eventually got to the point, I would say in my last year of teaching, where I felt that I was really doing well with this whole flipped with combination of project-based learning idea. But then all of a sudden, I started to get frustrated with how I was being asked to record grades. Because it was like, I'm starting to, I feel like I'm teaching in the 21st century manner, but yet our grading system is still in the 20th century manner. Mm-hmm. And it just felt like the two were not connecting at all. I don't know if you're starting to experience that at all either, or anything like that.
A little bit. I know for me right now, I'm still dabbling in that, in the whole flipped idea, but I will say that, you know, doing more PBL based learning this last, you know, few years, I can tell a difference with the upper level thinking with my kids, not just hitting that lower level content, but, you know, hitting it and then applying it. You know, for example, you know, one of the things I've done the last couple of years is we've done a big mock Congress unit or project that usually lasts about a week, where, you know, I split half the class up into a House of Reps and half the class into a Senate, and I have the kids elect a Speaker of the House and a President pro temp, and they have to push, you know, bills through into laws, and then I, as the president, because I always get to be the president, gets to, you know, pass those at the end. And they learn so much more doing that than they do, you know, doing anything else with resources, going through resources on how a bill becomes a law. They finally get to see it in action and do it, and it's great. You know, the kids always love it, and I just wish that I got to do more of that. And I think going to more of a flip style setting would let me do it, but I want to make sure that I do it the right way, because a lot of teachers that I know right now, they are having kids watch videos, and going back to what you said about the accountability and kids not watching videos. Well, some of them are not, most of them are not watching videos. The kids are not. I would say one teacher said that they posted a video in September, and by April it had gotten 4 views. And this was 3-4 units past. And they weren't doing much more on top of that in class, because the teacher didn't feel like they could, because the kids didn't have that baseline knowledge. So it was like she went to all this work to make the video and to post the video and design everything around this video, and the kids didn't watch it, and so it kind of fell flat. So that's, I think, my biggest concern about doing it is, if I take the time to do all of this, is it going to have effect? But you know, from what I'm gathering, it's all about, you know, the upper level thinking that you attach with it, and the project-based learning that you attach with it too. Because otherwise, if you don't put anything over the top of that, it's not going to be successful.
Absolutely. And so I'll mention 2 things. Lindsay posted over here in the comments. Lindsay, first of all, for those that are watching or anything, Lindsay, Steve, I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, Stevenson, and I'm sure she'll let me know if I pronounce that incorrectly, if it's Stephenson. But she did recommend the book Flipping with Kirch, which was just recently published and came out. And she said that there are a lot of strategies mentioned in that book for upper level thinking inside the classroom time, because that's where I get a lot of my questions from teachers that are looking to actually flip. They're like, okay, but what about my in-class time? And they start to freak out a little bit. And so that's where I find myself helping them the most, is develop those in-class activities, but also tying it into their learning standards and their content area and everything else.
Right.
And then the second thing, there was something that you said that made me think of something. What was the last part you said?
Well,
you were talking about.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to think. Well, there was something you said that triggered a thought for me, and now I lost it.
Well, just that, you know, and I won't say their name, but the teacher that, you know, has not had as much success as they would have liked. You know, they had their kids, they put this video out there, only 4 kids watched it, and there was no like upper level on top of that. And so, you know, they had to do lower level thinking in class just to make up for the time that the kids spent not watching the video or didn't watch the video. So that's just the biggest question for me is, you know, what happens in that situation if you make this and you make this video and the kids don't watch it?
That's exactly what it was. And so to that argument, it was really, and honestly, you cannot go wrong with anything. And I really firmly believe in trying to connect with John Bergman and Aaron Sams. They both currently do a lot of work across the United States and world. And a lot of their experience, since they were kind of the first ones that really pioneered this a bit and started to move forward, there's really nothing that they haven't experienced that you can't that you can't ask them and they're not going to have an answer for it. They've pretty much seen it all, and that if it's not for them personally in their own experience, they've probably seen it with other teachers. But there was one interesting thing while I was doing part of my research in grad school on flipped learning, was this particular interview. For whatever reason, it stuck out to me and all the stuff I had to read. This interview that John Bergman had with a magazine, an educational magazine, and there was that same moment that he experienced. He said, I put all this work into these videos, and then one day he had a kid come up to him in class and said, hey, can I just read the textbook? And John said in that interview that initially he was offended. I mean, who wouldn't be, if, you know, when you put that much work into something and a student would rather read the textbook, and that's like, I'm trying to get away from the textbook.
Right.
But then there was like this moment of enlightenment for him where he was like, honestly, it shouldn't matter how the kids activate the lower levels of thinking, so long as they do it. So he saw this as a moment of, whoa, you should be, instead of doing what I tell you to do, it was a matter of the student is actually taking the initiative.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most important thing. I'm going to back off. You might have some students that might not need to necessarily watch the video. Maybe it was content that they've gotten before somewhere else. And so you may not get 100%. In fact, thinking that you will get 100% from the students is very, very naive and highly improbable. So, yeah. I mean, for any teacher, not just you, right. I mean, any teacher, it's very, I mean, in fact, in all the studies I had to read, I was like 18 total studies and then like 15 other outside resources on top of that. And all of those studies, nobody got 100%. And right. That's what they were trying to get.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and by no means am I expecting that. That would be a miracle. To get 100% involved in anything, but yeah, it was. But I think getting, you know, she only had four video views in 3 months, and so, you know, I guess at that point, you know, I think I like what you said earlier about, you know, kind of having that upper level thinking be an expectation in your class of this is how it's going to work. And if you're going to have any success, you have to do this on your own, and really establishing that. Because the teachers that I know have had issues with flipped learning. I don't know that that's been happening. I don't know that that's been the case where they had that expectation.
Okay. Yeah, because what threw me for a loop when I started to flip my learning environment a little bit, the biggest pushback I got was from the straight A students. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've started to experience that at all, but the students that just knew how to play the game of school, that basically said, look, you don't understand. I don't want to think hard. I want you to tell me what it is that I'm supposed to put on this test so I can get my A. Exactly. They gave me the biggest pushback, and I can see all their faces and them getting all pouty and everything. I'm like, this is a different way of learning, people, and we're going to stick to it because I know it works. And right now, I know you're uncomfortable with having to be more active in your learning. Yeah. But we know it's for the better.
I agree. I always, at the beginning of each year, I always give my kids, you know, a survey, an inventory survey about, you know, themselves, how they learn best, technology, like what technology they have available to them, because I want to know that. And one of the questions I always ask them is, you know, what is your preferred style of learning? And with regular students last year, I want to say it was about 30% lecture-based. 30% of the kids said they prefer lecture-based learning. 40% said project-based learning. And I think the other 30% said anything that gets them up and active and moving, whether it's group work, whether it's project-based learning, anything that gets them up and getting, you know, kinesthetically learning, I guess. But with honors kids, it was like 70-30 lecture-based. And a lot of honor students were very uncomfortable because I tried to shift to Google Classroom last year too, and I'm still in the process of fully like going to that. But a lot of honors kids were very uncomfortable with that, and I felt like the regular students were more tech savvy and more able to embrace different styles of learning than the honors kids. The honors kids are brilliant and they're great, and I love teaching them, but I totally agree. if you throw something new at them, they tend to freak out a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of it. But what you mentioned two things as far as how to understand the technology and develop that digital literacy a little bit for students, which we know young kids, they start developing digital literacy very early, but really they don't know how to utilize tech. What I have discovered is they don't know jack about how to use technology for learning. They know how to use it for entertainment mainly and use it for socializing. But let's think about it. At that age, what is the most important thing for middle schoolers and, you know, even a little bit younger than that, and then even also high schoolers? They're trying to develop that third level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a sense of belongingness.
Right.
So that's why that is so important to them. And if there's a piece of technology that allows them to do that, or an app or whatever it might be, they're going to utilize it.
Right.
So yeah, that's the one thing. So students begin to understand how the technology can be used for learning purposes. There was a question about, you know, Mr. Dinerstein. I probably mispronounced that. I'm so sorry. But in response to him, I did post a link in the chat on the YouTube feed here to a website that I've created that was part of my master's. So long story short about that, we get into the master's program and we come to like the second to last semester before we're done, and then they say, we mathematically messed up. And we're like, what? They said, you guys are technically, we will be 1 credit short of being able to graduate with a master's degree.
Oh no.
Yeah, so they added another class for 1 credit, and that 1 class was create something from your literature review other than your 30-page literature review. And that it was that wide open. So I ended up creating that website because I thought, well, out of all these studies, essentially the ones that did it well and saw the results that they were looking for did these 3 steps. So it wasn't just one study, it was all the studies that did that. And then also Lindsay's mentioning too, like what kind of rules of thumb should there be for the videos? Because we know that that's a key piece to the lower levels of learning and pushing that information out, because there's huge benefits to the videos, as we know. Students being able to replay as many times as they want, pause and take notes if they need to, all that stuff. But she's got a great tip there of keeping videos 5 to 10 minutes if you need be, like no more than 10 minutes. In fact, I think I've even heard John Bergman say, you know, the more we learn about flipped learning, the more we know that it's about 1.5 minutes per grade level, capping at 15 minutes. So no 20-minute videos or anything like that. And a lot of these rules are very helpful. And on my website, there's one page on there that kind of lists some of the rules that the researchers found very helpful in those studies as far as what should you do for the video itself. And so Lindsay Stevenson, she said I pronounced it correctly. So she's got some good tips over there in the chat for those that are kind of following along a little bit too. And I was close enough on, let me try again. Mr. Dinners, I don't even want to try. I'm sorry. He said I was close enough, so thank you. If you put in your first name, I'll even call you by your first name. But Lindsay's got some good tips over there. If we're able to check out that little chat a little bit later, she's got stuff like starting to do like a tech boot camp to help some teachers develop the learning of the LMS. You know, all that stuff. And then also, I'm kind of read here. You said you're sort of dabbling into Google Classroom. Is that right?
Yeah. So, and actually, that was going to lead me into another question that I was going to have for you about the videos itself, but it will link into Google Classroom in kind of a roundabout way. So, so I started using this summer an app, well, I guess a tool called Edpuzzle that lets you embed questions into videos. So what I found was embedding questions into, you know, like the Crash Course Government series is awesome and far better than anything I could make. And I guess my question to you about, you know, your videos was when you taught, were all your videos your own? Did you use other sources? Because what I found is using I've had more success using, you know, like crash course videos or other sources and then having questions that go with it. Now with Edpuzzle, you can embed them right in. Or if there's something that, you know, I want to say over that, you can dub your voice over the top of it. And, you know, I can give a, you know, a verbal comment on top. There's a lot of cool things that you can do through that. So I just wanted to get your thoughts about using your own curated videos versus secondary source videos that other people have created.
Well, to answer that one, I could tell you two different things. I can tell you what I did, and I can tell you what the studies say you probably should do. What I did is I did start off at finding other videos. That's like the gateway drug into flip learning, is what I tell most teachers is, look, if you're not comfortable right now making your own videos because you just don't have the tech knowledge to make your own videos yet, that's fine. Go find other videos. But what I'll say is that the research shows that students actually prefer to see their teacher's face in the video, either at the beginning or at the end, or even hear the teacher's voice in the video. The main reason is because students felt more of a relationship with the teacher,
Okay.
which, I mean, we hear, at least I hear in my neck of the woods quite a bit, like, oh, technology is going to replace teachers. And if that was true, then the teaching wasn't effective to begin with. But
Yeah.
this right here, which I feel was it was a huge light bulb moment for me, was when it comes down to it, the student-teacher relationship is more important than the use of technology, than other methods of teaching and everything else. They still wanted to hear that, because when a student watched the video, even if your voice was in it, they would now approach you instead of saying, hey, in this video, he or she said, they would instead say, in this video, you said this. I got a question about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that, the different use of proper or with pronouns helps the student to understand that there is a relationship there. So while you may start with some curated videos, or what I ultimately ended up doing was I would make my own video, but then of course there are obviously people out there that pretty much said the same thing, but just with a snazzier video. I would include their video as well. So I would give the students options, because I started to change my own thinking as far as it just doesn't have to be my video. It could be someone else's video. In fact, sometimes I would have students go out and seek other people's videos, and I didn't have anybody ask me, could I read the textbook? But they would say, I read this over here. Is that okay? I'm like, you go for it, man. That's your call. So.
Okay. Well, then getting back to Edpuzzle, and that was going to bring me back to Google Classroom, because I know that's what you asked about. So Edpuzzle links right to Google Classroom, and that's what I've really liked about using it. Is, you know, that was one of the things last year with Google Classroom when I had said it, because I had my kids set it up, but we didn't use it. We used it infrequently, but, you know, once or twice a unit, but not full on really embracing it. But with Edpuzzle, you can load the videos right onto Google Classroom and assign them, and that's great, because a big problem I had with videos last year is the read receipts were always inconsistent, and, you know, you weren't really sure who really truly watched the videos and who just skimmed them. So it was hard to keep tabs on that. But with, you know, with Edpuzzle, that it seems like that's helped with that a little bit. So, and we just started the school year last week. That last Wednesday was our first day, so I haven't really been able to get into it fully yet. But I am excited about, you know, using that as kind of an avenue into that this year, because the kids were used to it. Their honors world history teacher last year does a semi-flipped structure, so they're used to it. So, and that's another reason why I've wanted to move to it for the last couple of years, is they have that experience with it, and I want to stay consistent with that before they go into their AP classes.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Lindsay actually brings up a good point over here in the chat, as far as, you know, we can put a lot of effort into the videos and everything else and whatnot, but she just wants, I agree, we should reiterate that it's the class time where the true teacher-student relationship is solidified ultimately.
Right.
And not only that, she's talking about the use of feedback that we get from those videos, or from whatever formative assessment we're putting out there. I know his first name is Les. Nice to meet you, Les. Les is mentioning the idea of using Google Forms, which is another very common thing. Edpuzzle, another very common tool. All of that. Now with Google, this is the big question I get from a lot of teachers in my area that I work with is what learning management system should I use? Do I go this route? Do I go that route? I have some schools that buy into the whole school-wide use of one LMS versus another. And I personally use Schoology. I started off using Edmodo, and there were just things about it that I could not put my finger on it, but I just couldn't actually like it with every teaching fiber that I have. I then switched over to Schoology and found myself being much happier. The main reason too was that we were one-to-one with iPads, and Schoology just worked a heck of a lot better than Edmodo on the iPad for the students. So that's one major reason I switched over. But what I discovered with Schoology is I got really used to the idea of being able to create folders for my units and then be able to structure the assignments and then, you know, create a whole hierarchy of folders and then subfolders and then assignments or resources or videos. And ultimately what I was able to do is organize it the way I saw fit. But then also I would ask the students, I would say, okay, we have a new unit. Do you want that at the top or do you want that at the bottom? And then I was thinking they would want it, you know, linearly. So the first unit was first and the ones at the bottom, no, they wanted it up at the top. And so having the ability to organize that for me was really big. Now, Google Classroom just came out with an update that lets teachers and students kind of do that, but it still doesn't do what you could do with another LMS like Schoology or Canvas, right, or even Moodle. Moodle's used here in our state as well. And so with Google Classroom, I don't know if you've been playing around with the latest update as far as being able to use, is it tags, I believe, or filters?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so you can tag certain things, but correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a while since I've actually played around with Google Classroom, but it's still just kind of a running stream, is that right?
Yeah, so the stream is kind of the main hub, and they've done a really good job, I feel like, with the updates that they've rolled out. The biggest reason why I use it is because we're a Google Apps for Education school. We're not even close to one-to-one yet. I teach in a school of 2,000 kids, and I think we have 12 carts of 30 Chromebooks each. So we're getting there, but a lot of those, I think half of those were added last year. So at one point we only had 180, you know, counting the computers in the library, we were only at like 250 or 300 computers for the whole school of 2,000 kids. So, but I think now we're, you know, more at like the 500 level. But still, I mean, that, you know, you have to check computers out, and it's not guaranteed that you get them when you want them. So a lot of the stuff that I assign for, you know, on Google Classroom has to be done at home or on devices. And I'm glad now that the app helps a lot because kids can, you know, work on their phones better. At first, when they rolled the app out, it was not great. But that's the reason why we've done it, is because we've really embraced the Google Apps for Education, and I love it. I prefer it personally, but it's a little tough not being one-to-one and doing that, because we're not one-to-one. I don't feel like I can fully go all Google Classroom yet. We use it, but not quite for as much as I would like to.
Yeah, so Lindsay points out topics. You can actually tag assignments and everything with a particular topic, and then that's pretty much sorting it into your units and so forth.
Right.
And so it still kind of works like a blog in that way. And Lindsay was also mentioning that she was BYOD, which for her made it work for 3 years while she was utilizing it in her own classroom. Mario, who's been having some questions throughout this entire chat, so I'm glad Mario's joining us. And so he just asked, how can a teacher use Flipped on day one? School starts tomorrow for him, and he has a class of ELA seniors, and he wants to know, are there any ideas to introduce flipped learning on day one? Do you have any suggestions before I chime in?
Man, why don't you go first, and then I'll kind of think from there based off what you say, because that's a tough one for me.
I'm going to, 1 second, real quick.
Okay.
I'm just grabbing something that I think is hugely important when I introduce it to students. I use this now when I introduce it to teachers. And it probably looks backwards maybe on the video for you guys. Let me see if you can actually see this.
No, I can.
Is it backwards?
That's not backwards.
Cool. So what I do is I use this advised version of Bloom's Taxonomy by Lauren Anderson, who also worked with Benjamin Bloom. Yeah. And what I usually do is, what I personally would do is I would show this to students day one. And this was a big selling point for me for students. It's a selling point for teachers. And the reason why I use the revised version, the upside down triangle, is because we want the size of that level in relation to how much time a student should be spending there in class. Definitely. So our ultimate goal is to push those out and then build those in.
Right.
And so what I would probably say to students is, look, this is the process of learning. They don't know this. They didn't go to college prep courses for teaching. And so once I started explaining this to students, I, as a teacher, in fact, I teach a blend flip cohort here through our AEA, and we've had over 100 teachers total or more, 150 maybe, that have gone through our cohort. And this is what we base everything off of. When we talk about combining flip learning with project-based learning with blended learning methods, when you combine the three, they're all centered on this. And I can't think of a better way to start telling students the idea of flip learning. Say, hey kids, look, let's be honest. In the past, I've probably had a lot of my class here, and we haven't had a whole lot of time to do some of this stuff, but I'm going to start switching it. And I want to push this stuff out. And I would hang, and in fact, we made it into a poster to give to teachers, and I'd hang this up in my classroom so students could see it all the time. And sometimes just periodically ask your students, hey, with this activity, where do you guys think you're operating cognitively? Are you here at this level, this level? What am I asking you to do? What kind of thinking are we doing? And so getting students on day one to start being metacognitive about their own learning will definitely help sell it, because I can't imagine. I wish I would have done this when I started flipping my classroom, because if I would have said to my straight A students, look, you've gotten your A's right here doing this thinking, people, but we're going to go here, and it's going to be uncomfortable at times, but the activities we do in class, I'm going to try really hard to make sure that we're doing these kind of things in class, which seems difficult now, but when we actually get to it, they're going to be more fun. You're going to find it more valuable. And I would say, in my own personal experience, when I started to do that kind of stuff, it was like every other day a student would say, man, this class goes so fast. And well, right. You were cognitively operating for the entire 45 minutes in the upper levels. That's why. So I think there isn't really one surefire thing to do day one with flip, to answer Mario's question here a little bit, but that's what I would probably start off doing, just so they understand what the heck it is we're trying to do. It's not about me making videos for you guys to watch. It's me making my best attempt as a teacher to be the best teacher I can be, so we can do the most effective learning we can do.
Well, as you were saying that, I thought, I thought I agreed with everything. But for a first day thing for me, I think what you were just alluding to about, really selling it to the kids. I think with this moving to something that they're not totally comfortable with, you almost have to be a salesman to a certain extent. And I think that's a really valuable thing to do day one, like you were saying, is just really try to sell the kids on the idea that it's different, it's uncomfortable, but it works and it's effective. And so I think that's a great way of going about doing it. But any way that you can do that, however, whatever works for you, as far as, letting the kids know, A, this is how we're going to do it, and B, this is why we're going to do it that way. I think that's the more important part, is explaining why we're going, how and why it's important to do that, and the effectiveness and the results of it, not just saying we're going to do this just because this is how I want to do it. I think getting kids to understand why it's so impactful really helps.
And I'm looking at the chat here also while you talk a little bit, and there's some good conversation. Lindsay's doing an awesome job being our chat moderator here and answering some questions. Yeah, I guess something I didn't understand about this new whole Google Hangout setup, Google themselves have switched this up on how to change, or actually how to start these kind of chats and make them live stream. Was once I start the live stream, because you remember how I said Lindsay had to jump out to turn over to another device. Well, during that time, I went ahead and started the live stream thinking she could jump right back in.
Oh,
but I guess it locks her out.
Oh.
Yeah, so a huge bummer there, but she's doing awesome and offering some great stuff to those that are following along here, and like Mario and Les and everything else. So she's doing great stuff. And she's also mentioning, she's also offering the idea of a possible day one is taking some of your classroom expectations or anything like that, turning that into a video and saying to the students, look, day one, we are not going to actually talk about our expectations. I'm not going to hand out a syllabus and walk through you with it step by step. Here is the syllabus. Go home and watch the video. And then day one, do an activity that starts activating their thinking right away. So she's also mentioning John Bergman. John Bergman's latest post actually talks about this a little bit. And he's saying, don't try to sell it. Just go ahead about it as this is what we do. We don't need to justify it anymore. It is then proven practice. So it's a part of it. And so I kind of thought of like setting up the why, and then the how part we will experience together in a way.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I think, I think we definitely see the intrinsic value of doing it that way. But I will say that I know the kids have responded so well the last couple of years when I've taken the time to really explain why what we do in class is what we do in class. And I know as a student, when I was a kid, I always appreciated when teachers explain the rationale of why they did what we did. And you don't have to do it every time, but I think, for a student to have this drastic push to something new that maybe they're not totally comfortable with, that at least, and maybe you don't have to do it for a full hour explaining why we would make this shift to flipped learning. But I think definitely at least, a short mention of this is why we're doing it, I think would definitely help. And that could be something that you could do absolutely on a first day.
And I got to say too, like even in my current role with this, I used this just the other day. I was supposed to lead a 2-hour, I don't know what you call it, session or workshop or whatever it is. But essentially what I was supposed to do is introduce to a staff of about, if I had a rough guesstimate, maybe 80 or so staff, maybe 100. I don't know off the top of my head, but what I did right away, you could kind of tell people were strolling in. I had set up this interactive Google Slides where there were certain activities. They actually had to make their own copy. And then there was manipulations on each of the Google Slides. Okay. So it was not used as a presentation tool. It was used as a tool to facilitate certain activities and thinking.
That's awesome.
But even to teachers right away, my very first slide after the title slide is I had this up on the screen. And I said, I just want you guys to understand that today is not going to be me talking to you for 2 hours. And that I understand that even as adults, professional learning has been more passive in the lower levels. But I want you to know that I will do my best today to get us in these upper levels as frequently as I can. So those of you that brought paper and pencil to take notes, you can go back to your room and go get your laptop and come back, because you're going to be doing some upper level thinking and you're going to need your laptop to do that. And so it was almost kind of like, ooh, what? And so they were more strolling back in with the laptops and everything. But after each of the activities, I would do the exact same thing I would do with students. I did it with adults even. I just said, look, with this particular activity, and I did use a flipped learning strategy. So what I did was I was trying to introduce the idea of what is growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And so in that understanding, what I did is I gave 3 videos. One was like a very elementary kind of video, because I wanted them to also use the videos in their own classroom if they wanted to take it to their own classroom. And so I gave 3 videos, and I said, based on these 3 videos that each talk about fixed versus growth mindset, they then had to come up with, in their small groups, definitions for both. So by having them, instead of watching one video and then just recalling what that video said, lower level thinking, just by having them watch 3 videos and analyze and evaluate the information in both of those, or all 3 of them, Now I've put them into the upper levels of thinking. And so after that activity, I posed that question to them. I said, hey, with this activity, where do you think we were cognitively? And it took some thinking at first, like, oh yeah, we really did get into these upper levels. And so it was a matter of just, I even use this with adults periodically in order to get them to understand, even with the teaching that I'm trying to do in this 2-hour time span, where are we really cognitively operating?
Sure.
And it worked really well. I got some really good responses from people that said, I didn't even realize we were in those levels until you pointed that stuff out, you know? So it's good to know and good to reference from time to time, I think.
Yeah, and there will be times with students where I'll introduce a project and I'll tell them, you know, one of the ones that, you know, jumps to mind is I've done a simulation where kids have reenacted the Second Continental Congress, and will, you know, in the past I've had them, you know, act it out, and they take on the different roles of people at the Congress when the Declaration was, you know, getting formed. But a couple of years ago, I had them do it via like Twitter chat, where they basically like got on as different characters, and because they were, you know, creating different feeds and they were interacting and they were analyzing, and they were hitting those top levels, and it was something they didn't even realize because they were having so much fun because they love Twitter. They were like, I didn't even think this was that, you know, that difficult, because it was something that they were used to. But then once they got into it, they were like, oh, this was tougher than I thought it would be. And, you know, I told them at the end, guys, we're up, like you guys are doing upper level stuff at this point. And so, but yeah, that's something that I'll do with my kids a lot of times too, is if we are hitting those top levels, I'll make sure that they know it. And a lot of times they won't even realize it until they do.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff too. I mean, they may resist you at first, like we had already mentioned, because I will even say that even in that room, there was still some people that wanted to be more in the passive role, which has been very traditional for, oh, is there kind of an echo going on?
A little, not too bad.
Okay. Oh, there. Either way, we'll get it. But I would say that even in that passive role, they were still, that's what they're more comfortable with. But as soon as we got into the active role and they realized that this was done purposefully, it actually has more value to it. It was like people were just jumping right in and thought, you know what, especially when you're talking about growth mindset and you're like, the whole idea is to possibly fail, but yet persevere. They were like, yeah, let's go ahead and try it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm trying to figure out what that echo is causing, if that's on my end or not. Do you hear it too?
Yeah, a little. It's not horrible, but a little echo.
Do you happen to have the YouTube page open as well?
I've been trying to open the YouTube page and I haven't been able to. So I haven't been able to see like the questions off to the side or anything.
Oh, that's fine. I didn't know if having that in the background was also causing some feedback as well or not, but that's all right. So other ideas that you want to throw out there? I'm going to send out this link one more time here and see. All right. So back to the questions. Lindsay's got some good stuff over here. Actually, Lindsay's asking you a question, Jordan.
Okay.
Have you tried introducing a project through using a video?
I haven't yet, but that's a great idea. That's something that I could definitely do. So is that something that you've done in the past?
I haven't, but it sounds like Lindsay has. She also mentioned she just brings up a few other points as well. So she's bringing that up as an idea, but it sounds like she has used that method.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And then she also mentions, let's see. If you don't mind, Jordan, I'm going to mute you. And then it sounds like I'm being a control freak, but I'm just going to mute you when you're not talking, so that way we don't get as much feedback. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I think that should cut down on the feedback. Yep, there we go. So she also has here, think about kids watching or not watching videos. The teacher has to make sure they do not repeat the video knowledge in class, which is another great point that she's bringing up, that you don't want to waste kids' time outside of class and then waste their time inside of class with repeating that information. If kids get the same info in class, they won't watch the video. That's a great point. They just understand that, oh, why watch this? They're just going to mention it here. She also says if someone asks a question that was answered on the video, then the teacher has to send them back to the video instead of answering the question and giving the info. So the idea of not necessarily answering the question for them, but being able to have them understand that there is a place to go to for reference. Did you experience that as well, Jordan?
Yeah, definitely in the past, I feel like that's something that, that's been the case for sure. One question that I had for you, when you were doing this, what kind of reactions did you get from parents? Were they supportive? Because I know that certain parents of teachers that have tried it in our building haven't. It's been a mixed bag. Some parents have been really supportive, and some have absolutely not at all, just because it's totally different than what they're used to. So I just wanted to ask your reactions as far as that was concerned. What your experiences were with that.
Well, I would say that I bet I can guess which parents what teachers got the problems from, or at least the concerns from which parents. I didn't necessarily have any problems with parents. I don't even know if parents, I don't think I really communicated to parents that this is going to be my new teaching strategy. I don't think there would have been a problem either way if they understood the why behind all of it. But I think that maybe the ones that these teachers come from, or they're getting the comments from, are probably those students that do really, 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 really well. And they are so focused on that GPA that they don't want anything to get in the way of that GPA. As well as something that Lindsay also referenced here in the chat not too long ago, using flipped learning strategies ultimately led to standards-based grading methods, which I was in the exact same boat. And any teacher who starts using flipped learning strategies or blended learning or project-based learning strategies, that's that whole thing that we talked about before, where once I start teaching in a 21st century manner and I find out that my grading doesn't fit that teaching, now ultimately is where my grading changes as well. So I always get in these conversations of, should I change my grading styles first and then my teaching, or the other way around? It's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know if there's one right answer or another, but ultimately you will see that bridge being gapped at some point. And I guess you could tell me if I'm right or wrong on those particular parents. I'm so hyper focused on the GPA.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. It was parents that were of students that were very grade conscious. And I always, joke, but it seems to hold some water that the parents you see at open house are the ones that their kids have the highest grades in your class, and you don't necessarily think that you need to talk to those parents. The ones that you want to talk to don't necessarily show up. So yeah, I mean, those were the parents that were the most vocal, were the ones that, their sons or daughters were doing grade-wise well in the class, but they didn't feel like they were learning and comprehending the content. And they were more worried for the year after, I guess, when they would go to an upper level class and they were worried, yeah, well, my son or daughter got an A or B, but were they really learning the material that they should have been learning? And will that hurt them in the future?
Yeah, and I've heard of stories like that, and that's why I brought that up. But I would say in that case, you may have to send more stuff out to the teachers. To the parents. I know that when a school or even a grade or even a teacher, when it's just a teacher within a building starts to do standards-based grading, there is such a massive amount of information that has to go to the parents just to get them to understand what the heck this is, what are the benefits, the why, the how, every little step. How do you basically interpret the report card? How do you, I mean, there's so much communication that has to happen, because same thing, parents will all of a sudden kind of freak out a little bit and question it and realize that is my kid really getting everything here, and all that other stuff. So there are legitimate concerns, and that's really what it is. But we also have to understand that we are involved in a profession, and when you are on Twitter and when you participate on this kind of stuff, you are in a position where you are making yourself professionally driven to find the best stuff for learning. And so when we know that this particular strategy is the best stuff for learning, and we know that this grading methodology is the best stuff to assess that learning, then we just have to make sure that we do our best to clearly communicate that to whomever ends up questioning it, because we basically have to prepare ourselves for those conversations of the what, the when, the where, the how, the wow, and all that other stuff. Is like, I actually, this last Christmas, I got into it with my aunt and her daughter, my cousin. And so because at their school, they went standards-based grading. The whole high school went standards-based grading. And she, as soon as I mentioned the word standards-based grading, she lost it. My cousin, she kind of, not really got in my face, but, and we have a rapport, so it doesn't really matter. But she's like, I hate it. And she started listing every single reason. And I said, well, tell me, I let her talk. I said, just tell me more. And she goes, well, this is what happened, this. And then the teacher couldn't justify this and blah, blah, blah. And I simply asked her, I go, okay, so we're talking about how it's being graded, but did the teacher change anything they were doing in their classroom? Tell me about the instruction that goes on in the classroom. And she was listing a lot of examples of traditional style teaching. I'm like, there's your problem. You have a school who basically said, we're doing standards-based grading, and there's the assessment piece. But when students are being assessed like that, but yet they're nailing the traditional part of the instruction, they're like, I got this, I'm getting it. And the two don't translate to one another, the students don't understand it. And so that becomes creates a lot of angst amongst parents and students and everybody else. So I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
No, I mean, I think that's about right. I know that a couple of years ago, we were in the process of maybe shifting towards standard-based grading, and it kind of fell off because some teachers were concerned about it. Not just the grading aspect, for the reason that you just said, that it would probably lead to an entire shift of what they do as teachers. And it was met with a lot of resentment, and didn't quite see the light of day. But I agree. I think it's the right thing to do. It is definitely a huge culture change, and I think it's something that's more effective when you do it as a building, because if, let's say, I were to do it, I can, and I'm equipped to do it. But if I'm the only one of their teachers that are doing it, then it's not that can't happen, but it would be much easier if it was a whole building effort. And I know the teachers that would like to do it on our building are still a little hesitant, just for that reason, that they don't want to be seen as the teachers that are completely different. Not that that's a bad thing. I think that's actually a good thing. But doing things that not everybody else is doing, and because I don't know, I'm just kind of mumbling at this point, but I feel like it gets to that point that, our teachers are a little concerned about that. And I'm one of them that, I would love to go to that, and I'm trying to work towards that, but it's definitely, parents would be a little concerned about it, and they voiced that.
Lindsay, it looks like the echo went away, so I don't have to mute you. Lindsay actually mentioned a great strategy here. She actually used videos, or she created videos to put on her parent website or her classroom website, and then the videos explain the procedures and the expectations to the parents. And she said she even got some good positive feedback from the parents. But she also mentioned too, sending a bunch of stuff home about flipped learning may not necessarily be necessary because maybe that would end up creating a worry that doesn't need to be there. I don't know. But I know with standards-based grading, that's a big thing that's talked about a lot is, wow, we went to standards-based grading and we started doing this stuff, and then these report cards came home that parents were like, what the heck is this? And so it ended up creating a much bigger headache in the long run. So I would say depending on what you're changing in your classroom, what you're utilizing, it might end up, whatever you find is necessary for your students and your parents. But yeah, she's referencing Rick, I never know how to pronounce his name. Wormley?
I think I've heard Wormley and Wormley, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know which way is the correct way, but I've heard it both ways.
And we read his book a couple years ago as a building. That was one
cool.
When we were looking at shifting towards that, he was one of the people we looked at the most.
Cool. And she also says here, Jordan, I was that teacher that was always doing something no one else was ready to do yet, but it was what was best for my kids, so I did it anyway. And just what you had already mentioned, Jordan, and I was in the same boat. I feel that trying different things, and this gets back to growth mindset. And this is actually a big part of my push when it comes to professional development. I think my niche right now is trying to personalize professional development and use a model that promotes more growth mindset, is because we have tended to do what has basically quelled all the other teachers from wanting to try those new things, is we've pushed this fixed mindset onto teachers through professional development. And so in some cases, it might be comments from other teachers or comments from an administrator or even comments from parents that would push us back into this box of teaching. But we know that this box of teaching is not what's best. And so really we need to promote, even for teachers, the ability to fail forward and try things for the betterment of learning, and be okay with if it doesn't quite work the way we want it to the first time, which I will say that was what happened with flipped learning for me. It didn't work exactly the way I was hoping the first time, but I knew that if I go back to the drawing board of focusing on pedagogy, we'll get there.
Sure, definitely.
And then Les is also put some tips on how to create a parent newsletter on Twitter. Oh, asking Lindsay. So Lindsay's been an awesome resource for all those people out there watching as well. That's kind of cool. So good, she can at least tag along over there and help out. But we have been in, I'm surprised, we've been in this chat. I just looked at the clock not so long ago. We've been in this chat for almost an hour and 15 minutes.
I just saw that.
Perfect example of when you are analyzing and evaluating and sharing and everything else. When you are cognitively engaged, time flies. So, and we are currently in the same time zone. And I know that Lindsay is in the Kansas City area, or the Kansas area. I don't know if it's Kansas City, but in Kansas. So I believe that's still the same time zone. I'm not sure, but I think for the most part, are there any other major questions? I mean, first of all, were your biggest questions at least answered in some capacity, or we offered something?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought this was really helpful. I appreciate it. The biggest questions I had were just, about buy-in from parents and students, what a class looked like when you did it, and you've done an awesome job answering that. So I really appreciate it.
Good. I'm glad, Lindsay could offer some stuff. Les is also here. He's actually in California, which is kind of cool. So that's learning awesome. Goes beyond just the four walls of our own office or bedroom or house or whatever it is. But yeah, I agree with Lindsay. Lindsay says we should do this again sometime. And I think if she can join us, via video, now that we know to not start the chat until everybody's there, I think she'd be an awesome resource to get on video to help people, because like I said, she was doing flip mastery stuff. So getting her take on that, what that kind of looked like in her classroom, might also help you as well down the road as you progress forward. But I appreciate you sharing your information, because even learning from your experiences, that's something that I can take and pass along to teachers that I work with as well.
Sure.
So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
This was fun, and I think with that, if there aren't any other questions or answers out there, I'd be willing to call it good for tonight, and then with the intent of maybe possibly back down the road at some point, and even pulling in. I know that Crystal Kirch, the author of Flipping with Kirch, she couldn't join us tonight, but she was wanting to at some other point. She might be one to bring in and talk about her book a little bit and the flipping strategies. And then also anyone else who wants to share resources about flip learning. I kind of like to, let me get your take, Jordan, here. Do you like the informalness of it, or do you feel like we should have maybe prepared some questions ahead of time?
I really like the informalness. I like both. I'm starting to get more active into the weekly Twitter chats, and I like the idea of it being structured. I'm going to be moderating one for at least a couple for high school government chat in about a month or so leading into the election. So I'm in the process right now of getting my questions together and scheduling them for, scheduling them on TweetDeck. And so I do like that, but I liked this informal structure too. So either way, I wouldn't have qualms one way or the other, but I did like this.
Cool. And I don't mind doing this from time to time either, bringing in new faces and expertise and getting those takes of everyone. Lindsay also said that I should mention that I did forget, but she did do Crystal Kirch did do a webinar recently, which I'm sure is out there somewhere, and Lindsay might be putting that link in here at some point, but we'll be sure to send that out as well and give her props. And then also Lindsay put in there in the chat Crystal Kirch's Twitter handle. So it's just Crystal, Crystal, and then her last name, Kirch. But as I mentioned, she's got a good book out with great ideas, published by the Bretzman Group, Jason Bretzman, who I also connect with on Twitter. And so it's a good group of people to be around, because they're always willing to share ideas, and you can't go wrong with other teachers trying out the same stuff as you and learning from them. So
definitely.
Well, it doesn't let her drop in links. But she'll be sure to retweet it. So if you're following Lindsay at all, she'll tweet out the link to that webinar, or otherwise just tweet at Crystal Kirch, and I'm sure she'll give it to you as well. So other than that, I appreciate it, Jordan. I appreciate the time.
I appreciate it too. Thank you.
We will chat with you later, and just stay connected on Twitter if you got more questions.
I will. Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you later, man.
All right. Have a good one.